The sun had only just begun its hesitant climb above the maple crowns of Brook Lane Avenue when the neighborhood's security cameras logged their first motion blip of the day. A lone elderly man in tan corduroys and a plaid flannel jacket, shuffling past Mrs. Reyes's rose trellis with a wool cap askew and confusion clouding his gaze. To most passers-by the image would have seemed ordinary, a grandpa taking an unhurried stroll before traffic thickened. But those who knew Robert, Bobby, Thorne understood the danger that rippled beneath the calm. Bobby's Alzheimer's diagnosis had entered stage 3 only a month earlier, and Dr. Carol Parks, his neurologist at St. Anne's Memory Clinic, had warned the Thorne family that sundowning disorientation could strike at any hour, dissolving landmarks and time stamps in an instant. Bobby's son Trevor, working an early carpentry shift, didn't yet know his father had slipped from the kitchen table where he'd been sorting postage stamps. Nor did he see the white-faced Pitbull who padded silently into frame 5 seconds later. Nose lowered to asphalt like a detective reading Braille only scent can write. The dog wore a blue nylon collar faded by years of sunlight. The tag etched one word: Harbor, a name Trevor's daughter, Willa, had whispered into her hands the first day the rescue shelter let her cradle the scared, underweight pup 2 Christmases ago. Harbor's head cocked as she regarded Bobby's weaving gait, tail lifted halfway, curiosity, not alarm, then dropped in a slow wag that signaled decision. She trotted to Bobby's right side, close enough that the cuff of his jacket brushed her shoulder. Bobby paused, blinking as if the neighborhood had just emerged from fog. His eyes drifted to the dog, recognition flickering, then extinguishing like a candle meeting breeze. When he resumed walking, Harbor matched speed seamlessly, her body tilting ever so slightly inward, a living guardrail redirecting him toward the sidewalk whenever he drifted toward the curb where morning commuters would soon barrel through. Footage from the second camera, mounted under the eave of the Patel family garage, showed Harbor glancing at each cross street before Bobby stepped off the curb. At Willow Creek Drive, she pivoted, planting herself across his shins until a box truck rumbled past. Once danger had faded, she resumed the pace, bumping his knee gently to coax him forward. This choreography repeated at Elmhurst, at Copperleaf, and finally at the intimidating intersection with Carter Boulevard, a 4-lane thoroughfare where rush-hour impatience often drowned out pedestrian crosswalk beeps. Inside the Thorne house, a different alert sounded. Willa's smartwatch pinged the moment Bobby's medical-grade tile beacon lost signal from its designated geofence. She was packing her backpack for 10th grade biology when the vibration buzzed across her wrist. The screen displayed a blinking yellow dot drifting east on a simplified grid. Willa's breath caught. She shouted for her mom, Casey, who was rinsing coffee mugs. Within 90 seconds Casey had Trevor on speaker, and together they triggered the Harbor Cam command through the Pitbull's GPS-enabled collar. Trevor had installed the collar's miniature forward-facing camera during the last remodel project, soldering spare doorbell cam parts and wiring them to the canine GPS tag. The firmware connected to a family cloud app written by Willa's Tech Club friends. Until now its primary use had been posting point-of-view park romps to Willa's TikTok. When the app flashed green, Casey tapped the feed. The collage of images stitched from Harbor's collar cam and neighborhood doorbell uploads created a living map, Bobby's pixelated silhouette, Harbor's ears framing the lower corners, street names superimposed with augmented reality labels. Casey's stomach flipped. Her father-in-law was heading straight for Carter Boulevard. 2 miles away, neuroscientist Dr. Parks clicked open an email titled, Canine Wayfinding Enigma. A graduate fellow had attached preliminary data comparing canine olfactory mapping to hippocampal pattern completion. The file referenced Harbor's earlier off-leash return trips recorded by Willa, suggesting the Pitbull's route optimization stemmed from grid-like firing within interhinal border cells similar to those found in rats and bats. Dr. Parks barely finished the abstract before her phone rang. Willa's panicked voice cut through, telling the neurologist exactly where that data was playing out in real time. Carter Boulevard roared its usual morning anthem, a dissonant orchestra of diesel engines, squealing brakes, and muffled podcasts, and Bobby stepped toward the white paint of the first lane, eyes reflecting nothing but low-angle sun glare. Harbor lunged forward, teeth finding the hem of his jacket, tugging with insistent pulses. Bobby staggered back, confused agitation creasing his forehead. A sedan blazed past, missing his toes by inches. A bystander's dash cam captured the Pitbull's muzzle jerking him clear. They posted the clip later with the caption, "Guardian Angel with a blocky head." At that instant, traffic lights to the north cycled red, awarding a 30-second lull. Harbor released Bobby's coat and paced 4 steps into the crosswalk. Glancing over her shoulder, tail wagging half-mast, Bobby followed, uncertain but compliant, mirror neurons perhaps firing faint echoes of the dog's purposeful stride. They reached the median just as the lull expired. Horns blared. Harbor pressed shoulder to Bobby's shin, holding position until adjacent lanes stilled. When a delivery van braked, the driver, later interviewed by Channel 5 News, claimed he had never seen a dog look so fiercely authoritative. As if a canine traffic cop wearing invisible badges. He struck his flashers, giving Harbor and Bobby a safe corridor through the last 2 lanes. 6 minutes later, the pair turned onto Juniper Court, a cul-de-sac lined with sweet gum trees and mailboxes painted in whimsical motifs. Harbor's pace slowed. She pivoted at every driveway, nose sampling the air. Scent plumes formed an olfactory breadcrumb trail as distinct to her as neon arrows. On the third house, blue shutters, tomato vines curling over chain link, Bobby faltered. Harbor stopped, gazed up, tail giving tentative swishes. Bobby's eyes tracked along the garden path, over the porch rail, toward a black metal mailbox whose front plate carried a familiar dent earned years ago when he'd misjudged its swing. Recognition flared brighter than previous flickers. His shoulders sagged in exhausted relief. He whispered a soft, "Oh," a syllable equal parts wonder and embarrassment. Harbor responded by nudging his thigh twice. Then sitting, posture tall, a sentinel awaiting final confirmation, Bobby knelt, slowly, joints cracking, and hugged the dog around her stout neck. The home security camera across the street recorded the moment. Timestamped 7:18 a.m. 2 houses down, Casey's crossover screeched to a stop, followed by Trevor's pickup, then Dr. Parks's Prius still bearing a medical staff hangtag. Willa burst from the passenger door, sprinting barefoot despite gravel underfoot. She reached her grandfather as he rose unsteadily, face streaked with confused tears that shifted toward sheepish joy when he saw his family. Harbor stepped aside to allow hugs, then pressed into Bobby's left calf, steadying him with canine ballast. Trevor pried open the mailbox, revealing the day before newspaper Bobby had stuffed inside in a moment of clarity. Bobby blinked at the headline, then at the porch, finally exhaling a shaky, "home." Later, seated at the farmhouse kitchen where trestle beams still smelled of fresh stain, Bobby sipped chamomile tea while Dr. Parks checked vitals and gently guided conversation. Cataloging cognitive flashes and memory gaps, Harbor curled at Bobby's feet, one paw atop his slipper, chest vibrating with slow rhythmic breaths. Casey's phone chirped, a push alert from the Cloud app now compiling all footage into a single story file titled Harbor Path 702 to 722. The ensuing week turned that file into digital gold. Local station KXAZ stitched together doorbell clips, collar cam POV, and treetop drone footage volunteered by the Patel kids' hobby quadcopter. A motion graphics intern layered a 3D map. Harbor's route glowing blue while Bobby's meandering path glowed red. Viewers watched the 2 lines merge intersection by intersection until they overlapped at Juniper Court. Social media erupted. The phrase, "Alzheimer Angel," trended for 48 hours. Skeptics argued coincidence, but neuroscientist Dr. Parks went on air to explain canine sensory integration, how Harbor likely recognized Bobby's gait variance, detected cortisol spikes in his sweat, then overlaid that data onto a mental map reinforced by daily walks and reward loops. She cited the 2024 Helsinki Canine Navigation Study, which used fMRI to show dogs activating pattern completion circuits when searching for lost owners in novel environments. In lay terms, the dog sees the world partially through smell-based landmarks, stitching fragments into a reliable route algorithm even when visual cues blur. Dr. Parks concluded with a nod to Harbor's breed. Pitbulls score high on problem-solving persistence. Pair that with their loyalty and you get an animal who refuses to quit the maze until the human is safe. Public fascination ballooned into something tangible. Corporate sponsors offered to bankroll a pilot program placing GPS and camera collars on trained neighborhood dogs living with dementia patients. Trevor, a carpenter suddenly fielding calls from biotech venture capitalists, laughed at the absurdity but agreed to help fabricate weatherproof dog kiosks for emergency transmissions. Willa's Tech Club coded a Harbor Net app that allowed verified neighbors to piggyback their porch cameras into a voluntary tracking grid. Privacy advocates raised eyebrows. But early adopters argued that when minutes matter, anonymity ranks lower than life. On crisp October evenings, Bobby resumed supervised walks, Harbor trotting just ahead, white face gleaming in sodium streetlight halos. Some nights Bobby's mind slipped again, names fluttering away like startled moths. But Harbor's presence kept panic at bay. Their loop extended 3 blocks. Then 5, always ending at the dented mailbox. Neighbors began leaving notes tucked inside addressed, "To Harbor, thank you." The Thorne family started a scrapbook. Within months the pages overflowed. One letter came from a retired air traffic controller whose wife's dementia had isolated them. He wrote that Harbor had given him courage to adopt a rescue mutt of his own, part terrier, part mystery, hoping the companionship might coax his wife into gentle walks again. Another envelope carried a sketch by a second grader, a Pitbull wearing angel wings guiding an old man across a rainbow crosswalk. Yet the purest testament arrived quietly one fog-laden dawn. Bobby, now escorted by both Harbor and a lightweight GPS wristband Willa engineered, paused at Cedar and Larkspur. He squinted at a mural painted on the Patel family garage, a bright depiction of Harbor and Bobby beneath the caption, "Love Remembers." Bobby's brow knit in thought. You could almost see synapses reaching across chasms. He turned to Harbor, patted her head with renewed certainty, and spoke her name in a clear, deliberate voice. "Good morning, Harbor." That single sentence, caught by the garage cam and transmitted to Dr. Parks's clinic, prompted a team meeting. While Alzheimer's marches one way, moments of lucidity sparked by emotional anchors, like the reliable companionship of a dog, can bolster quality of life. Dr. Parks recommended integrating Harbor more formally into Bobby's daily routine, incorporating scent-based memory games using items from Bobby's past, cedar shavings from his carpentry bench, old 8-track cassette cases, the smell of his favorite lemon balm shaving soap. Harbor became facilitator, nudging Bobby toward correct answers, tail wagging as dopamine and oxytocin mingled in both species. Months slid into a year. Winter rains washed Brook Lane clean. Spring wove honey locust fragrance through open windows. And summer's furnace light returned once more. The program born of Harbor's walk expanded statewide, Canine Compass Project. 17 certified dogs now wore collar cams and GPS beacons, shepherding dementia patients who still craved autonomy. False alarms decreased as communities learned to trust 4-legged navigators. One night, after a city council meeting approved funding for further expansion, Trevor knelt beside Harbor on the porch. He scratched her speckled chin and whispered, "You changed how the world sees our kind." Harbor leaned into his palm, eyes half closing in modest acceptance. Bobby's condition eventually progressed beyond neighborhood strolls. He moved to a memory care cottage on the family property. Walls hung with photographic milestones. Harbor visited each evening, resting her head on his knee while he drifted through stories that looped like vinyl crackle. Even when words failed, his hands found her fur. Nursing staff claimed his heart rate stabilized fastest when Harbor was in the room, as though her presence tuned internal metronomes to a safer rhythm. On the first anniversary of Harbor's guided rescue, Brook Lane's residents gathered at Carter Boulevard for a small ceremony. City workers unveiled a new pedestrian island featuring an engraved bronze relief, Harbor in profile. Bobby's hand on her shoulder, footprints leading across stylized asphalt waves. The plaque read, "In honor of everyday guardians who guide us home when memory cannot." Local news covered the event with respectful brevity. But later that night, a featurette aired nationally, footage of Harbor's original patrol juxtaposed with slow-motion shots filmed in IMAX resolution of her walking Bobby across an empty crosswalk. Autumn leaves swirling, Voiceover by a silver-throated narrator intoned. We praise heroes who roar. Sometimes the greatest save merely wags. Donations to the Alzheimer's Association spiked 12% in 24 hours. More meaningful, perhaps, were the hundreds of emails from families describing similar canine rescues. Previously untold because they lacked the drama of a flood or avalanche. Border collies herding grandmothers from driveway to porch. Labradors blocking unlatched gates while a confused uncle searched for childhood baseball fields. Mutts curling against dementia sufferers during GPS outages until search teams arrived. Neuroscientists seized the narrative momentum, publishing white papers on cross-species caregiving that cited Harbor in footnotes. In one TED Talk titled, Pause and Pattern Completion, Dr. Parks presented side-by-side brain scan animations. Canine interhinal grid cells lighting in stable lattices while human hippocampal regions flickered and fizzled under Alzheimer's assault. When the dog accompanied the patient into a scanning chamber, certain hippocampal subfields glowed briefly stronger, as if the brain borrowed structure from the dog's certainty. The talk concluded with a slow-motion clip of Harbor nuzzling Bobby's elbow. The audience rose in unison. The night Bobby passed quietly in his sleep, Harbor lay curled beside him, head on his chest, hearing the gradual fade long before nurses' monitors flat-lined. Willa wept into Harbor's fur as dawn pinked the horizon. They buried Bobby beneath the sweet gum he'd planted the day Willa was born, nestling a small box of his stamp collection at the roots. Harbor sat vigil until starlight pricked the sky, then finally allowed herself to be led indoors. Years will pass. Harbor's muzzle will silver fully. Her steps slow, but every child on Brook Lane will still shout her name when she ambles by. The city council has already drafted plans for Harbor wayfinding trails, walking paths festooned with educational plaques about dementia, empathy, and canine navigation. Dr. Parks's lab will likely unveil a wearable interface translating canine trajectory data into augmented reality prompts for caregivers. Built on open-source code Willa plans to release after college, and perhaps one late afternoon, long after the cameras that first captured Harbor's humble escort have been replaced by models we cannot yet envision. A new grandparent, lost between memory and moment, will step off a porch in some distant suburb. A dog's nostrils will flare, grid cells will spin to life, and paws will set a course between danger and safe return. The loop will begin anew, bark, nudge, pause at every corner, let recognition ripple through fog. Guide the cherished human back to the dented mailbox of familiarity. No anchor line, no adrenaline rush, no headline fanfare, just the quiet, steadfast heroism of a creature whose heart aligns effortlessly with the pattern of home. In that everyday grace lies the legacy Harbor forged, that when memory wanders, love, four-legged, determined, and infinitely patient, can still read the map. Midwinter draped Brook Lane Avenue in a hush that felt almost sacred, frost-feathered mailbox flags. Telephone wires hummed brittle notes in morning wind, and even the neighborhood ravens hopped rather than flew, unwilling to test the thin glaze of ice that rimmed every branch. Inside the Thorne house, Harbor's breath plumed small clouds as she waited by the mudroom door, tail giving a patient metronome tick. She wore a new teal jacket sewn with reflective microdots and lined in merino wool. Willa had stayed up past midnight reinforcing every seam. The girl emerged now, cheeks pink from radiator heat, a spool of nylon rope over one shoulder and an open laptop in her arms. Calibration walk, Harb, she said, voice husked with equal parts excitement and lingering grief. Harbor nosed the rope, head tilting for harness straps. 1 month had passed since Bobby's funeral, and though the family still moved through pockets of sudden silence, moments when someone would start to speak and realize the intended listener was no longer here, they had also begun to channel absence into motion. Casey volunteered at an adult daycare center 3 mornings a week. Trevor took on a small woodworking commission restoring memory boxes for hospice families. Willa, fresh off early admission acceptance to the University of Arizona's biomedical engineering program, wrote so much code the blue light tinge under her eyes often rivaled dawn. Today's walk was field trial 2 of the HarborNet Live Guidance module, a Bluetooth mesh between Harbor's collar sensors and a wrist-worn haptic cuff that Willa intended for dementia patients still capable of solo strolls. Harbor's natural navigational decisions would trigger vibrations on the cuff, a left buzz for danger left, a constant hum for pause, a soft right pulse when safe to cross. Human and dog, one extended nervous system. They stepped onto icy pavement. The collar HUD display pinged. Cognitive assist mode active. Harbor's nostrils tested air currents, identifying pinch-sharp notes of pine cleanser from a cleaning truck idling 2 streets down. Citrus zest from Mrs. Reyes's turned compost. A faint metallic ping that might be treated road salt. Her mental overlay formed a map. She guided Willa east, tail high. At each intersection Willa's cuff buzzed with near-perfect sync to Harbor's choices. It felt like the dog whispered directions through skin instead of ears, tactile telepathy. Halfway around the loop, a sudden scrape of tires shattered the quiet. A sedan slid across Cedar Drive. Anti-lock brakes stuttering on black ice. Fishtailing toward a mail carrier who froze under the street lamp. Harbor barked, a deep, decisive thunderclap. Willa's cuff jolted so sharply she flinched. Pulses rattled right left right in rapid sequence. Harbor lunge, snapping leash slack, positioning herself broadside between car and carrier. The driver regained control of breath before impact. Slewing to a stop, the mail carrier stumbled back unscathed. Heart hammering so loudly Willa heard it across the street. She gripped Harbor's harness, soothing furrows behind ears. Back home she synced the collar telemetry. Bark decibel spike. Gyroscope torque. GPS delta. All logged. She appended an entry to her project roadmap. Emergency proximity bark should trigger 3 pulse cuff alert. Works. Calibration complete. News of Harbor's enhanced role reached Dr. Carol Parks, who arranged a demonstration at the St. Anne's Memory Clinic. A half-dozen patients sat in a ring of upholstered chairs, each wearing a prototype cuff. Some looked wary, others quietly amused. Harbor trotted the perimeter, sniffing slippers, offering her trademark forehead nudge to anyone who hesitated. Dr. Parks pressed start. Willa guided Harbor through a series of micro-obstacles. A rollator placed crosswise in the aisle. A dropped pill bottle. A volunteer, wandering, patient heading for a doorway. Each scenario triggered collar tags and corresponding haptic cues. Within minutes even Sebastian Ruiz, a former engineer whose language centers had eroded until speech formed gnarled syllables, leaned into vibrations, adjusting his walker before Harbor steered him clear. Tears pricked Dr. Parks's eyelids. She mouthed to Willa across the room, "It's working." Funding followed, modest first. A county health tech grant. Then an NIH innovation seed. Prototypes multiplied. Willa recruited her friends Renee and Jamal to design lightweight collars integrating solid-state litter beams the width of a pencil eraser. Trevor retrofitted a spare bedroom into a solder lab. The smell of flux and cedar mingled oddly with Casey's sourdough experiments. Harbor bore it all with stoic grace, submitting to endless fit adjustments, ear temperature checks, and treat-reward calibration loops. But innovation rarely travels a straight line. Mid-spring, an elderly tester named Lorraine drifted too far beyond the geofence while Harbor was momentarily distracted by a squirrel darting under a fence. The cuff buzzed but Lorraine's neuropathy dulled sensation. She kept going. Staff found her confused but safe 5 blocks away. The incident punched a hole in Willa's optimism. She spent that night poring over sensor logs, cross-comparing nerve conduction studies. Solution: embed miniature piezo buzzers with accelerometer feedback. Cuff vibrates against bone at variable intensities. Casey supplied a medical-grade silicone wrap to keep contact even when wrists shrank with weight loss. Meanwhile, Canine Compass Project expanded statewide. Trevor's carpentry crew assembled modular training apparatuses, foam, crosswalks, scented obstacle mazes, adjustable traffic noise speakers. Video tutorials starred Harbor demonstrating ideal guiding posture. The Department of Aging broadcast them to residential facilities across Arizona and New Mexico. Requests spiked. Could the program scale to goldendoodles, Gilas, senior beagles? Willa's algorithm accounted for breed gait patterns. Dr. Parks tightened criteria. Dogs needed baseline impulse control and strong human social attachment first. A year slid past. Zenith's hips stiffened, but she remained the program's elder states dog, teaching recruits to read subtle micro-hesitations in human steps, a pivot of ankle, a sagging shoulder. Harbor, though graying at the muzzle, still fronted most demos, her white blaze now iconic on clinic brochures. One crisp November afternoon, while installing a fresh collar on orbit for her first solo practical, Willa heard footsteps approach the kennel corridor, measured. Hesitant, she turned to find a stooped man in early 50s. Straw hair, eyes anxious. His name was Dylan Thorne, Trevor's estranged brother. A musician who had drifted away during Bobby's decline. Guilt gnawing until he finally drove from Santa Fe to help. Dementia genetics whispered at back of his mind. Every forgotten lyric seeded dread. He asked if Harbor might walk him through the route Bobby once loved. Hoping to feel closer, they set out at dusk. Dylan, Harbor, Willa 10 paces behind. Leaves scudded along gutters. When Harbor paused at Carter Boulevard median, a ghost relic of that first rescue, Dylan's shoulders shook. I wasn't here, he muttered. Harbor sat, leaning against his leg, weight enough to stabilize tremor. Streetlight glow ringed them in amber. Willa captured a discreet photo. Later she printed it, captioning beneath, "Grief navigated as love on a new map." Winter solstice brought a summit. Neurologists, engineers, canine behaviorists converged at the Beacon Center. Presentations filled the converted barn auditorium. Dr. Parks revealed fMRI visuals. Alzheimer's patients wearing haptic cuffs while conversing with service dogs displayed reactivated cingulate cortex bursts, areas linked to orientation and emotional regulation. A professor from MIT demonstrated swarm mapping algorithms, dozens of neighborhood caller feeds merging into predictive heat maps of wandering patterns. The keynote, delivered by Willa, detailed next-gen, bark to beacon, compression protocols allowing instantaneous video snippets to reach caregivers' AR glasses. Applause thundered, but perhaps the most moving demonstration happened offstage. Harbor, sensing an attendee's rising anxiety, an early-onset patient overwhelmed by crowds, guided her through a side door onto the veranda. Pressing nose to her palm until breathing slowed, someone filmed quietly. The clip later closed a PBS documentary titled Silent Maps, Dogs, Memory, and the Future of Care. Spring returned, early wildflowers blazing magenta carpets along washes. Harbor's vet pronounced her heart strong but advised limiting high-heat demos. She took semi-retirement gracefully, trading crosstown patrols for school visits. Children listened wide-eyed as Willa explained grid cells and olfactory landmarks. Harbor accepted belly rubs, radiating calm. Then came the call from Kyoto. A Japanese research collective analyzing tsunami evacuation behavior wanted to integrate canine guidance data into coastal early warning protocols. They invited Willa and Harbor for a fortnight. Logistics whirled, quarantine paperwork, ocean crossing sedation risks declined. Climate difference tough on senior dogs. Ultimately, they opted for remote collaboration. Beacon Center shipped 3 collars, Japanese Shiba Inus trained under remote supervision, streaming telemetry back as they escorted volunteer elderly through simulated evacuation zones. By Harbor's 12th birthday, the program boasted 142 active dog teams in 5 countries. Yet Willa worried about attrition. Dogs aged out faster than training pipeline filled. She proposed pairing veteran dogs with junior apprentices, literal mentorship on 4 legs. Harbor took Orbit and a timid rescue named Lumen under her wing, Paw. They practiced tandem guidance, Harbor leading, apprentices flanking, reinforcing stop cues. Data showed 37% faster skill acquisition than traditional positive reinforcement alone. Love taught better than leash. July heat rolled in like a kiln. During an outreach demo at Suncrest Retirement Village, a power outage struck, killing AC. Staff scrambled. Temperatures soared. Several residents risked heatstroke. Harbor, awaiting her turn on stage, sensed distress. She pawed Willa's knee, ears twitching. Willa unclipped harness, said, "Find help." Harbor trotted hallways, locating an EMT restocking gear, dragged him by pant leg to the overheating lounge. Emergency respite cooling units deployed. The facility director ordered collar cams for every therapy dog within a week. 2 months later, Willa stood at the same mailbox Bobby once rediscovered. Harbor beside her, Orbit on the other side. A moving van idled. The Thorne house had sold to a young family. Trevor and Casey downsized to a one-story closer to Beacon Center. Willa inhaled scent memories, cedar, old leather, breakfast bacon ghosts, and felt sadness but not weighty. Harbor nudged her hand, then, in a gesture almost uncanny, circled and sat exactly where Bobby had knelt when memory returned. Orbit mimicked the pose. Willa laughed through tears. They drove away at dusk. Rearview mirror showed mailbox shrinking. Then gone. Ahead, Beacon Center lights shimmered. A new litter of candidates awaited temperament testing. Grants from Japan and NIH would fund a second barn. A mobile training van. Scholarships for under-resourced shelters. On Harbor's final evaluation checkup, Dr. Singh found a faint arrhythmia. Not dangerous yet, but time whispered. Willa curled beside her that night. Playback of earliest collar cam video looping on tablet. Morning sun. Bobby's shuffled feet. Harbor glancing back. Quiet heroism. She stroked fur. Legacies secure. She murmured. Harbor sighed. A content rumbled deep in chest. Years will unfold. Harbor may pass quietly. Ashes joining Bobby's beneath sweet gum roots. Orbit and Lumen will ascend to senior mentors. Their collar footage teaching dogs continents away. The culvert sense net that saved motorists will inspire urban wander net for dementia care. Every lamppost a node emitting canine translated pulses to guide wandering elders. Dr. Parks will publish a landmark paper, Interspecies Neural Synergy in Navigational Rehabilitation. Children yet unborn will learn the story of a white-faced Pitbull named Harbor whose gentle interventions rippled across disciplines. And somewhere, maybe in a bustling Tokyo backstreet dizzy with neon or a Serbian village curved along a river, an older soul will step beyond familiar threshold, chased by fog of forgetfulness. A dog's nose will rise to the breeze, reading panic like braille on wind. Paws will set to pavement. A collar beacon blinking first green then gold, translating instinct into technology, empathy into vibrating cues on a fragile wrist. Intersection by intersection, they will trace a map back to dented mailboxes, to porches smelling of home cooking, to names realigned with faces. No headlines will blare. Perhaps no camera will catch the moment. But somewhere on a server built from open source code a little blue line will complete its loop. And a quiet notification will ping on a caregiver's watch. Harbor protocol successful, loved one safe. And that, in the hush after every storm, whether it be monsoon flash flood, winter black ice, or the relentless erosion of memory, will be enough. A heat-shimmered dawn found the Sonoran horizon blushing carmine when Harbor's heart surrendered its final unhurried beat. She lay in her favorite place, the patch of sunlight that poured through the Beacon Center's clear-story window and warmed the cedar floorboards to a gentle toast. Orbit rested nose to nose with her, sensing a stillness deeper than sleep. Lumen lingered just behind. Every breath a question. Outside, cactus wrens scolded a passing roadrunner, oblivious to the hush inside the training barn. Willa Jordan, now 21 and long since accustomed to the cyclical departures that mark life in a rescue compound, felt something primal snap nonetheless. She had prepared for this, she told herself, lining a soft flannel shroud and assembling a tiny honor guard of trainees in bright green vests. But when she knelt and touched Harbor's cooling cheek, grief cut clean through her rehearsed composure. She pressed her forehead to that speckled fur and whispered every thank you she could muster, for guiding, for guarding, for giving her a compass against despair after Bobby's decline. Sam and Casey arrived within minutes, summoned by a silent alarm in the kennel's vitals feed. They paused in the doorway, the kind of pause that tries to erase time, to pretend there is still a moment left to rewrite the ending. Trevor appeared next, shoulders bowed not from carpentry fatigue but from the sudden vacuum where Harbor's steadfast presence had always stood. No one reached for tissues or platitudes. They simply sat in a circle around the dog who had rewritten how their town, and, in small increments, their world, thought about memory and guardianship. The official protocol for a program dog's passing involved removing the collar, wiping data logs, and retiring the call sign in the beacon registry. Willa unlatched the collar, feeling its weight heavier than any tech could justify. She traced the worn engraving, Harbor, Guide number 001, and placed it atop a folded desert rose blanket. Orbit sniffed the collar once, then nudged it toward Willa's chest, as if to say carry it forward. They buried Harbor beneath the sweet gum beside Bobby's stone, adding a bronze plaque shaped like a compass rose. For the ceremony, every handler across the state sent remote collar pings at the same moment. The beacon network lit up in a constellation visible on the control room display. A silent canine salute flickering from Flagstaff pine forests to Tucson cul-de-sacs. Grief sought alchemy, transforming quickly into tribute. Willa channeled hers into the Harbor Legacy Initiative, a project that had simmered in notebooks for months but now demanded life. Open-source collar schematics, multilingual handler curricula, and a licensing model that gave any shelter, even those in resource-strapped regions, the right to duplicate Beacon's training framework without royalties. She added one stipulation: each facility must pair with a local memory care clinic and commit to joint community drills. The internet accepted the challenge with ferocious enthusiasm. Within a year, nodes sprouted in KwaZulu-Natal, in Western Ireland, in a Maine lobster town hammered by nor'easters. Orbit graduated from mentor to legend in the making. Her specialty became mid-fog interception, those first 2 minutes when a dementia patient's facial expression subtly shifts as orientation wavers. Orbit could detect microscopic stiffness and shoulder roll, a change in foot cadence, sometimes even before the patient themselves knew confusion had landed. A University of Arizona study fitted both Orbit and the patients with synchronized motion sensors. Orbit anticipated wandering episodes with 89% accuracy, outperforming the best cortical rhythm algorithms by 20 points. The paper's conclusion was blunt: empathic biomechanical attunement in canines eclipses current AI models for early wandering detection. Engineers took notice. A startup spun out of the College of Engineering proposed a hybrid wearable, canine harness plus patient cuff meshed with ultra-wideband positioning. Willa served as technical advisor, insisting all code remain open source and data anonymized. Venture capital balked, but a philanthropic foundation fronted the seed round, citing Harbor's story in their annual report under a heading, Technology Guided by Empathy. Yet not every chapter could be written in triumph. A high-profile misstep unfolded when an unlicensed facility in Nevada tried to fast-track undertrained dogs. One handler allowed a shepherd mix onto a bus full of fragile elderly without proper acclimation. A panicked lunge injured a passenger. Headlines blared, "Rescue dog program gone wrong," and regulators threatened moratoriums. Willa flew out, testified before state boards, and conceded gaps. She drafted the Harbor Integrity Accords, minimum international standards, mandatory temperament audits, and a community review board empowered to suspend badges. Crisis became scaffold. By its close, Beacon's protocols were stricter, stronger, and more respected. At the personal level, grief never fully receded, it merely changed shape. On the 3rd anniversary of Harbor's passing, Casey found Willa standing at the memorial tree at sunrise. Collar in hand, she thought her daughter wept, but then noticed Willa laughing softly. Morning light had caught the compass plaque, bouncing onto Orbit's chest in what looked like a new badge. Willa turned, eyes bright. "She's still giving cues," she said, and somehow it felt true. Time spun forward. The Culvert Sense net matured into the broader Lattice Guardian grid, a continent-spanning mesh that folded flood alerts, wildfire smoke drifts, and dementia wandering routes into a single resilience dashboard available to first responders. Its icon on every terminal, a stylized white Pitbull in mid-stride. At international climate summits, engineers referenced Harbor moments to explain how hyper-local interventions ripple into macro-level systems change. The Pitbull stigma softened under relentless example. Insurance carriers revised breed restriction clauses, citing new research on training outcomes. Harbor's collar sat on a Smithsonian display beside the Apollo guidance computer. Under a sign reading, "Navigating the Human Condition," visitors tapped screens to watch montage footage. Harbor tugging Bobby clear of Carter Boulevard. Zenith guiding a flood victim. Orbit intercepting a care home resident at a stairwell. Viewers often left with glistening eyes. Willa, now Dr. Jordan after completing a dual PhD in bioengineering and cognitive science, accepted a professorship that let her split time between laboratory and field. She pioneered empathic robotics, small drone companions that worked in tandem with dogs, projecting amplified bark directives or pheromone-based olfactory cues to extend canine influence across larger zones. Critics dubbed them digital scent sprites, but trials in hurricane shelters showed a 30% reduction in senior agitation incidents. And still, the work found humble expressions. One spring morning, Willa wheeled a mobile VR cart into Brook Lane Elementary's multi-purpose room. Third graders strapped on headsets loaded with Harbor's Walk, a gentle simulation placing them in the dog's perspective, smelling emotion, reading micro-body clues, pausing at intersections. When the session ended, children asked if they could take dogs home to keep grandparents safe. Willa smiled, pointing to the school therapy dog, a floppy-eared mutt named Comet, fresh from Beacon's Level 1 certification. "Start here," she said. Heroism grows local. Orbit's muzzle streaked gray. Her hips stiffened but spirit stayed kinetic. On quiet evenings Willa sometimes glimpsed her sprawled beneath the clear-story window's golden rectangle, same posture Harbor favored. One autumn dusk, while golden leaves tumbled across the training yard, Orbit failed to rise after nap. Her passing was swift, gentle, dignified. They buried her beside Harbor, beneath a mosaic of rivers made from cobalt glass shards that caught sunlight and flung it across the courtyard like liquid galaxies. Legacy compounds. Lumen assumed mentorship, joined by Kendall the Kelpie mix and Juno the Collie cross. Tech evolved beyond anything Harbor might have recognized. Yet every advancement still traced back to her first deliberate tug on a jacket hem. In the lab's server room, a master process ran nightly, Atlas_Demon. A tongue-in-cheek nod to the earlier Flood hero Atlas and to Harbor holding Bobby's Lost World aloft. It stitched datasets, river rise telemetries, collar trajectories, heart rate correlations, into evolving algorithms that powered everything from paramedic dispatch predictions to social worker scheduling for isolated elders. 3 decades slipped by. Willa, hair now streaked with silver reminiscent of Harbor's blaze, retired as professor emerita and took a state advisory role steering animal-assisted urban planning. Cities consulted her team before approving new zoning. Where will dementia-friendly walking loops go? Which shelters could partner for canine compass hubs? She often began presentations with a single image, an old man kneeling beside a white-faced dog at a dented mailbox. Without fail, planners grew quieter, pens slowing, the metrics on their spreadsheets suddenly textured by human pulse. At the Centennial Gala for the Alzheimer's Association, Willa delivered a closing reflection. No slides, no data, just story. She spoke of a morning when pattern recognition faltered and love stepped in wearing fur. She described how that one act had rippled into sensor grids, policy shifts, and, most crucially, a reframing of caregiving from pity to partnership. When she finished, the hall stood mute until applause rolled forward like tide. Back in Arizona, Dr. Carol Parks, retired but still hosting quarterly seminars, penned an op-ed for The Lancet Neurology, summarizing decades of research seeded by Harbor, canine human interbrain feedback loops, scent-triggered memory recall, tactile trust circuits. She closed with a hypothesis. If consciousness is partly a function of co-regulation, maybe the true cure for disorientation is not a pharmacological bullet but a living map. Dogs, she argued, offer such maps, sensory lattices into which faltering minds may temporarily graft. Harbor proved it. The Beacon Center eventually became the Harbor Institute for Interspecies Navigation, HIN. Pronounced HN. Students from 5 continents interned there, building collars with graphene batteries thinner than paper, testing haptic socks for neuropathy-numbed feet, translating dog posture into augmented reality streetlight cues for color-blind seniors. Yet through all progress ran a quiet through line: alleyway cameras, porch cams, service dog cams still captured everyday rescues never destined for primetime news. A beagle named Taffy redirecting her owner from a subway stairwell in Chicago. A Mastiff mix halting an anxious veteran at a Baghdad traffic roundabout, buzzing his cuff until mortar fire subsided. A poodle shepherding a grandmother through the labyrinthine alleys of Venice when carnival crowds overwhelmed her. Each clip rolled into the global Harbor Net repository. Each triggered a small badge, H1, H2, now well into 6-digit counts. Analysts joked they'd measure the success of civilization by how many invisible rescues layered underneath daily bustle. Late one night, long after the gala, Willa wandered into the Beacon archive loft. She pulled Harper's original collar from a sealed memory box. Its circuitry looked primitive compared with quantum-encrypted chips now standard, but the leather backing still carried a faint whiff of cedar. She clicked the power button, obsolete battery long dead, and imagined a flicker of green. Maybe ghost electricity. Maybe memory doing what it does best, keeping circuits alive beyond logic. She climbed the spiral stair to the rooftop. Stars wheeling overhead. Somewhere down in the valley, a siren wailed, sensors no doubt already triangulating response. She held the collar against skyglow and spoke softly. Wherever you are, the map still listens. Wind rustled the mesquite, sounding uncannily like a wagging tail. At exactly that moment, hundreds of miles south, a young border collie named Vila nudged an elderly artist away from a coastal cliff path when fog rolled in thicker than milk. A cuff vibrated, steps corrected. On Beacon's server, Atlas_Demon logged the event, incremented the rescue counter, and sent a silent acknowledgement to dormant callers worldwide, an unbroken chain of gratitude stretching back to Harbor's first morning patrol. The desert night breathed. Somewhere, a dog barked once, sharp, certain, and quiet returned, as steady as paws guiding someone home through the labyrinth of forgetting.